I think woodworking as a craft, whether you're a hobbyist or a professional doing this as a career, really interesting. Because when you talk to these individuals, you start to get a sense of deep fulfillment and joy when they speak about their craft or showcase their projects. And I think this is predicated on two basic elements of the human spirit that need to be fulfilled, which is creativity. We want to build cool things. And the second part, which is connection. You want to share those, pieces of furniture or the homes you build or the dining room table that brings friends together or go on boat rides with, loved ones. There's a lot of different applications of woodworking, and you start to see people get real joy in this craft because I think it hits those two human elements. But my point of this video is not to sell you on doing woodworking, which I think you should, is it's incredibly vast. And as you learn skills, you get really excited and you start to get an idea of what areas that you might want to delve into more deeply. And it's very challenging to give yourself a barometer or a gauge on how well you're doing against that. So I want to spend time in this video kind of deconstructing how I would hit the pause button on my, several years of doing woodworking. And by the way, I'm no expert, but I want to have a time for self-reflection on how I would redo this over, but also give you as the audience to chime in, drop a comment below on how you would have done a restart and kind of accelerated your set of skills so you can build really cool things and share it with people. So let's take a pause and break down woodworking and see how we can apply this to really any trade or any skill acquisition. So let's go. Let's take an example from a passion of mine, which is furniture making. And I want to give you the framework on how I deconstruct this so I can give you a lens on how to differentiate project A versus project B and in which order you should tackle them. So let's use an example with furniture making. I'm sitting on a stool right now. There are certain characteristics, certain design aspects of it. And there's a lot of other components essentially that comprise the stool. Now, if I had a rocking chair right next to me, very similar structure, but different function. One rocks back and forth, this is more stable. And in order to achieve each one of those outputs, it requires a different set of inputs. And that's kind of the key function here that we're going to break down is when you look at the different types of projects, try to break it down in the sense of what you see as characteristics. And then you'll start to find out, oh, there's a design element there, or there is a function principle that we're trying to understand here. So using the same vein of a stool versus a rocking chair, well, one is stable, one rocks. And there's a lot of, science that is predicated around the rocking chair that's not around the stool, i.e. being stability. So you can start to quickly see just that this project is going to be more difficult. There's more information that I need to go acquire than to build, say, a stool versus the rocking chair. So that's kind of the first principle there is look at the things that you want to build and start to just gather information. You can kind of actually be intuitive. Your brain's pretty smart where you can look at the array of projects and say, this is kind of a general stack ranking of what would be more complex than the other. Now let me break that down specifically for furniture making. Now when we look at furniture making, I'm going to kind of read off a few things here and you just think about the basic principles of it. And once you get these categories, you'll start to see unique patterns and how you can say this project is more difficult than that one. So first and foremost, you have the design. You have the function of it. So the stool, all right? So this is going to have me seating in it. There's going to be a seat. There's going to be a back to it. And because it's a stool, it's going to be slightly raised at a, not necessarily bar height, but countertop height. And that's going to be probably 30 inches. So there's a lot of understanding on basic design or form or function principles that go into a particular project that comprise the design. The next thing you need to kind of break down is how is this joined together? All right, is it using screws? Is it using traditional woodworking joinery where we use, let's say, dovetails or mortise and tenon? You can start to look at what that looks like visually. You can just see like, oh, okay, I don't see any screws here, so they're probably using some form of advanced joinery that is more complex than just taking a screw and screwing it in. So the next thing is that the types of materials that go into that piece of furniture. All right, there's not a whole lot here, but like you can think about like, hardwoods versus softwoods. A lot of different characteristics based on those two principles. More knowledge is probably needed to know for, say, hardwoods versus, say, softwoods. Because more often than not, you're probably doing dimensioning with hardwoods, and you're doing just, well, I'll say fine dimensioning for hardwoods, and you're more rough dimensioning for softwoods. Next thing is like the tools that you use for incorporating that joinery, the materials into it. What does it take to shape and mold and join those together? And then lastly is the finishing. Now, these are kind of the basic principles in all furniture building of what's the design, what are the functions of it I need to incorporate to actually get it to be that function. How is it all joined together? Now, there's different degrees of that. What materials I'm going to use and select for this. What are the tools that allows me to shape and join that wood appropriately? And then how am I going to go about finishing it? And after that, you start to think about more of kind of a domain expertise on what is the set of building methods or order of operations that go against that. And then lastly, okay, you got it all on a blank slate of piece of paper, kind of breaking down, looking at this piece of furniture. I need to build, a seat, maybe 4 legs and then a back. And then you start to think, okay, I need this, that, and XYZ tool. Now I need to go acquire those skills. So that's kind of the basics of it. And that allows you to kind of like look at project A versus project B. Okay, well, rocking chair needs to rock. Well, the wood needs to be curved. Curved is actually kind of a unique skill set to actually create, whether you use it on a bandsaw or if you do some form of like steam bending, whatever, a lot of different solutions for that outcome. And you can start to see that rocking chair is probably more complex than a stool. This next part of, I would say, deconstructing a woodworking journey for furniture making is putting them in cohorts. And what I mean by that is a set of projects that is a culmination of a lot of those inputs that give you an output that is loosely grouped together. And there's distinct differences of like, say, I want to build some, shop cabinets versus building cabinets for your kitchen or say a vanity. A lot of different kind of domain expertise that goes in that, design principles that you may not even think about doing in your shop, but you would need to do it in a actual setting inside your house. So you can start to see how like things are sequentially more, challenging. I know that's a more simplistic way of looking at it, but you'll find that a lot of this is just intuitive in the sense of that looks harder than this. But if you want to use a rule of thumb for knowing what phase of, I would say, furniture making that you're in, it's probably best that you can start this way too, to allow for degrees of error and, mess ups and learning opportunities. Is your first phase is probably going to be doing a lot of projects in the garage. I think about my journey and coming into this is, well, first off, I don't have any space. So I used, my brother's shop, his tools and things like that, which I think is a great way to start your journey into woodworking, saves a lot of money, and to see if you enjoy it. But once you do kind of get the hang of building odd end type things with your friends and family's kind of tools that allow you to use, you start to get, I would say, into your garage phase where you may build, a workbench, or you'll build maybe some, cabinets that are kind of rough, nothing like shaker style or anything like that, but good box construction that you can do pull out drawers, whether the slides or not. And you start to look at the different components of what can make a shop, and then you can build things within that set of cohort. And what this kind of teaches you is, material selection, budgeting for your project that you're going to do. It gives you skills in like defining what your cut list is. It gives you skills in measuring. It gives you skills in using the basic tools that you're actually going to find out are very common throughout all of furniture making. And your first cohort, whether it's building furniture or you're doing, carpentry for homes or boat building, you probably want to put into your first cohort the set of skills that is going to be all encompassing down the line. So if you think about like furniture making, you're always going to be gathering material, you're going to be measuring, and you're going to be cutting or rough cutting that material to the size that you're going to build for your project. So in your first cohort, I call the garage phase, is building out the set of projects that maximizes your learning in that space before you go into building, let's say, more refined furniture and odd end parts of your house. So I'm going to pause there, let that sink in. Garage phase is a very distinct and critical component of building out basically the principles of all of wood shaping for furniture making. So let's go on to part 2. Now, part 2 of your, I would say, cohort of woodworking journey for furniture making is probably a little bit bigger scale, a little bit riskier, and it requires some investment. Probably investment more tools, maybe like 1 or 2 specialty tools to do said project, or it is going into a space that has, I would say, visibility. So like, let's say you're going to build picture frames, or you're going to build maybe some shelves inside the house, or I would say a lot of just odd end type projects that are not like, your furniture that you sit on, furniture that kind of like is more accessory level into your home. This is kind of that second cohort where you may get those specialty tools, more unique pieces of material. You may delve into, I would say, hardwoods, which is a little bit more aesthetically pleasing into your home. And this is a great space where I think a lot of people get overwhelmed, and you can get pretty squirrely in the amount of tools that you're going to acquire in this space, and then the amount of new skills that you're going to incorporate into your project. So what I want to do is I'm going to give you an exhaustive list, on screen here, but on my Patreon, I'm going to have a live document that I'm going to continually update and try to build out a sequential order of projects and the set of tools/skills that you need to tackle here. So that way you can see, hey, these are, my, category B projects, and these are kind of my early level category B projects, like a picture frame versus like, say, floating shelves. And that way you can get an idea of what could be something fun that would be, I can tackle, but also I don't have to go and buy 5 new tools. So go to my Patreon page. I'll try to have a pinned document, or I'll figure it out. But I'll put a link down below in the comments pinned that shows directly to that link. So go check it out. Let me know if it's helpful. If you see something that is maybe out of order or you want to add to it, feel free to drop a comment, because I want to keep that document living, and I think it's going to be a great way to, refine my skills, but also help guide whoever else wants to dive deep into the realm of woodworking, specifically furniture making. Okay. Now, the third part of a woodworking journey. Okay, so let's say you've done a few projects where you bought some specialty tools, you more investments, you've probably done maybe a cabinet, inside the house, or some floating shelves, or let's say maybe you put a little bench in your foyer. You're starting to get the hang and expand the set of tools that you have in your shop. This next phase is, I think, probably important. They're all important, but this one's really interesting because you have two paths. And those two paths are either you follow plans or you have some form of originality into it. And probably some of this is actually in category 2, but in category 3, this is where you really kind of get into it. It's like, I'm building furniture and, I have a path there. I strongly urge in the beginning, if you want to complete projects, there is so much that a lot of creators and makers out there that go through to create these plans. And if you've ever done a project without any plan, and you're starting with a notebook, and you actually want to put some real design elements into it, not just like functional things, but like, design, this type of joinery for this little, using the edge grain versus the end grain, or like you start to think about all these things and how it all comes together. You'll find you'll probably tack on an extra week, maybe 2 weeks onto your project, maybe even quit the project and just stall out all completely. So as you're learning the skills in this third group and you're starting doing projects, I strongly urge to consider investing into the creator economy of, and I don't have any plans for pay, so it's not me speaking on behalf of myself, but like, I know there's a lot of great ones out there that I have followed that has drastically reduced the failure that is in these projects. So just a little tangent there of, if you go into this third category and you're really enjoying the craft, I strongly urge you to acquire plans until you maximize your familiarity with all the different skills that go into actually using the tools and joining this and finish this project, so you can actually reap the rewards. And then once you achieve that, then start to think about, okay, I want to start bringing my own originality in this. Now, I'm going to say this takes a lot of skill. And I think this kind of gets you to the mastery level where you can add back to the community. And I can think of, like, let's just step out of furniture making for a second and let's go into, let's say, I'm a framer. It takes some good domain expertise on, you understanding what constructs a wall. You got your bottom plate versus your top plate. Your bottom plate, you got, probably pressure treated wood because it touches the concrete. You got your studs, probably 16 or 24 on center. You got your king, you got your, I'm not a carpenter, so I know some general terms, but like, you start to know those components that construct it, but then there's this whole other realm of structural engineering. So like, you don't build something that like collapses and destroys an entire investment. So furniture making is kind of the same thing, where it's like, I've spent all this time learning the components of, what makes a table. So like, you got your legs, you got your countertop, you got a stretcher, you got, maybe some type of crossbeam to keep it from racking. You start to get all those kind of general aspects of how to build functional pieces of furniture, but then you got the element of form, the design. And when you dive really deep into your craft and you start to think about those two human elements of like, I want to create really cool and beautiful things and I want people to experience it, this is kind of the pinnacle of where you're going, because you need to know all those skill sets in order to actually leverage them and connect that to some form of design principle. And that's why I suggest, when you're starting out in that last category, category 3, that you are using plans to master those skills. And then you bring in kind of that last element, which is the design, the form. And I say this is the pinnacle where you start to look at certain pieces of furniture or boat building or guitar making or, framing. Like there's all these different kind of woodworking aspects on it where you've mastered the skills of constructing it. Now it's actually mastering the skill of designing and incorporating those principles into it that make something functional and beautiful. So that's the concepts of breaking it down into three, your garage phase, you got your beginning phase with like coming inside the house, and then you got your, I would say, dive deep into the realm of design and further refinement of a specific piece of furniture or musical instrument or boat or house. This is where you start to come up with your own solutions and add back to the community. And that's where the deep and fulfilling aspect of really investing in your craft and being able to really problem solve that has that deep, fulfilling, and joyful aspect of the woodworking trade. So the last thing that I want to call out in the journey is that there's a need for, or like the hunger or desire to learn. If you don't have that and you don't find joy in it, then it's probably best to think about pivoting to something else. And you know what, like it's probably not, some people may peak. They may want to do something that is, for me, less interesting, or, what I do is not interesting for others. And that's the whole point of, this is a journey, it's a craft, and you start to find out what aspects of woodworking or whatever craft that you choose that is really intriguing. I don't know how to describe it differently than that, but something that you want to like really delve into it. So for example, one of the reasons that once I got to, I would say, phase 3. So, I built out the garage. I've, done cabinets in the house. I've done a vanity. I've done chairs, desks, and things like that. I'm starting to find out there are certain projects that are very intriguing for a particular reason. It's because I am highly focused on how people, do work. So I think of like, I've been a remote worker for a long time in the corporate world, and I have my own workspace. I built my desk. It's a raising and standing kind of sitting desk. And I thought about like the general flow of being a knowledge worker in, the corporate world. And I like to think about like that flow. And then I thought about other things that I built. I built an outdoor bar. And it's like, what's unique about that? Well, it brings people together. It brings the opportunity to, place food on there. So I start to think about, flow. How do people work? What's unique about that? And I've started to delve in certain projects that I find intriguing, that now I can go look on the market. I can go look at other design studios, or I can go look at, big box stores that have, like Wayfair and whatever. Let's look at their desk. What's unique about that? What design elements I can bring into it that furthers my skill and fulfills that creativity itch, and then also the ability to like connect with other humans that value that outcome. I think that is very critical to think about when you go through really any career that you have in life. And if you're not finding the joy that you're willing to, stumble, learn, overcome challenges, then it's probably best to kind of like pivot. I've done a few different projects that like, I don't care to master cabinetry. There's probably people out there that just love it. I don't, that's fine. And I want to leave you on this video as you kind of like dissect and deconstruct your craft and your woodworking journey, is to do, a lot of different projects, within reason, because it can get really expensive. I build homes, and then I also build boats, and I also build, furniture. But like, do within reason, and find that thing where you can actually go the distance and you want to just truly understand and you want to give back. And I think that is probably the most critical thing on enhancing your craft and developing your skills. So I hope you appreciate this video. I know we're at the end of it. I haven't done like a like and subscribe. I know that's kind of the way we allow the algorithm to push this video out. So if you really appreciated this, thank you. Hit like if you haven't subscribed. This is the way I think about woodworking, and specifically like deconstructing your craft and being better, and making really cool things and sharing with people. So I appreciate it. And also, if you haven't, go down on the bottom of the comments. I have a link to the Patreon where I have that live document that I'm trying to deconstruct woodworking and furniture making into those 3 phases. So, all right.